Gifted education is elitist.
Gifted students are good at everything.
Gifted students don't need help. They'll be fine on their own.
Aren't all gifted students the same?
He shouldn't be in the gifted class. Look at his marks!
But aren't all students gifted?
Despite the considerable literature in the field of gifted education, myths about gifted students continue to exist. To show you how and why these myths are, well, myths, let's use the analogy of the elite athlete. Myth number 1. Gifted students don't need help. They'll be fine on their own. Here's Philip. Philip has outstanding natural abilities as a cyclist. He rides every day and has exceptional potential. He could be an Olympic cyclist. Would you, as a coach or a friend, say, he'll be fine, he'll get there on his own, and expect that he'll be able to get himself into the Olympics? Or would you help him by providing him with the training, advice, and support that will actually get him to the next level? The same applies to gifted kids. Yes, they have natural abilities, but we know that both environmental factors such as family, friends, and school and intrapersonal factors such as motivation, temperament, and volition affect whether or not that natural gift becomes a talent. We can't just say that a gifted student will achieve on their own. We have to be agents in the process of transforming that gift into a talent. If we don't act in this process, how can we reasonably expect a student to succeed? Moreover, if we do nothing, we might be actually causing the student to underachieve. So, what do gifted students think about this myth?
I think it's weird when people say that gifted and talented students don't need help, because we need help and we can be gifted and talented in some areas but not others. So we may be gifted in maths, not English, so we need help in lots of areas. Saying that gifted and talented students don't need help is sort of like being really stereotypical, because they might be smarter but they still need help, and it sort of makes me put the pressures on when people say that we don't need help.
Myth number 2. All gifted students are the same and should be taught the same curriculum. Let's use our example of Philip again. Let's say that he has gotten to the Olympics. At the opening ceremony, Philip walks out with the Australian Olympic team. They are all elite athletes. Just because Philip is an elite cyclist, does it necessarily follow that all elite Olympians are cyclists? No. We have swimmers, gymnasts, hammer throwers, wrestlers, and soccer players. Is this a homogeneous group? No. There is variability in the talents, interests, and attitudes of this group. So why do we assume that gifted students are a homogeneous group? Within a gifted contingent, you will find students who are brilliant mathematicians, artists, writers, designers, engineers, marketers, and counsellors. There is huge variability in the interests, attitudes, and dispositions of these students. Just as no athlete is the same, no gifted student is the same. So therefore, we can see why there might be a problem with teaching all gifted students the same curriculum. Would you train a gymnast and a wrestler in exactly the same way? You'd hope not, or that could be dire. No. Instead, you would provide each athlete with individualised and differentiated training programs that cater to their needs. The same applies to gifted students. The gifted mathematician isn't going to want to do exactly what a gifted artist is doing. These students need individualised and differentiated curriculums that foster talent development and acknowledge their unique gifts. This is also important because gifted students have unique socio-affective needs. If we don't acknowledge and validate their gifts, we could drive a gifted student to underachieve or experience social and emotional conflict. Would you train an elite sprinter the same way you train a social runner? No. The social runner, who jogs once or twice a week, cannot be reasonably expected to achieve success like the sprinter, and the elite sprinter cannot expect to continue their talent development if he trains like the social jogger. The same applies for gifted students. Their needs simply cannot be met if they continue to be taught the same curriculum as everyone else. The consequences of not providing adequate challenge are concerning. Disengagement, disaffection, underachievement, potential school dropouts, and possible socio-affective issues. So, what do gifted students think about this myth?
I think that when people say that everyone in GAP's class is the same, makes me feel maybe a little bit mad, that because they're thinking that everyone is the same, but everyone has their different weaknesses and strengths.
And when I hear this myth, I feel very mad, like that kind of feeling, because like I enjoy some different subjects to some of my peers, I'm pretty sure, because a lot of my friends like maths, but I prefer English, and I may prefer science over art, and most people will probably disagree with me. So when I hear this, I feel that it's very untrue, because everyone is different, no matter if they're not gifted or are gifted.
What we need as gifted learners is for our teachers to understand us,
And we also want a teacher who understands what we like and dislike, and what we want to learn, and what we're not very interested in.
yeah.
But when we have a substitute, we feel like we're like in an entirely different classroom altogether. So we prefer to have our regular teachers than a substitute.
Yeah, and substitute, they may sometimes teach like not very up to our level, and they haven't been used to the kind of teaching we have been, like we've had, which is normally sometimes more difficult than what they're teaching.
So what we think together is that more teachers should be trained in teaching gifted children,
and to be like able to teach maybe more difficult and learning about what the child wants, and to bring that into their teachings.
Myth 3. All gifted students are high achievers. Here is Philip again. Let's travel back to a time before the Olympics. Philip's been having a rough time at home and school and hasn't been putting much effort into races recently. He's been achieving results in the middle of the pack. He misses out on zone regional qualifiers. Can we immediately assume that Philip is not a talented cyclist? Or could it be that there are other factors that are causing him to achieve at a standard that is lower than we'd anticipate? This is one of the most pervasive myths affecting our gifted students. Just because a student doesn't perform well on a test or doesn't produce, can we immediately assume they aren't gifted? Herein lies the phenomenon of the gifted underachiever. This all goes back to our perception of what it means to be gifted. For years, we have assumed that to be gifted, you have to produce something: an Olympic medal, a doctoral thesis, full marks on an exam. These products, however, are actually indicative of talents, whereby a student's gift has been nurtured enough for them to convert it into a talent. So just because a student doesn't produce doesn't mean they aren't gifted. They might just not have had the right interaction between the environment, individual characteristics, and the talent development process. Yet. So, what do gifted students think about this myth?
I think it's a myth that people think that all gifted students should be high achievers in general, and we think that it puts a lot of stress on people, and which can lead to mental problems at such a young age. And also, people are good at different areas, so I am better at English than maths. So, yep.
So we think that just because we may be considered as high achievers, we all think that we're high achievers in some areas of learning, but in other subjects we might not be as good as people may seem.
Students might not always be high achievers because they might not always be challenged, and they might not always have the right teachers to give them challenging tasks. And it's not that they're not gifted, it's the fact that they're just in the wrong place.
Ultimately, we need to provide gifted students with appropriate learning experiences, not only because it is mandated by the curriculum, but also because it is our moral obligation to help these students be the very best they can. The first step in doing this is by considering our own attitudes to gifted students. How have the dominant myths and ideas about gifted students been recreated in your ideals and teaching practices? Today, we have broken down just some of the myths that have been perpetuated in the minds of teachers, parents, and students alike. Acknowledgement is the first step, but action is key. How can you help the gifted student in your class reach the next level?